welcome Dr. Welch, and we're really appreciative that you agreed to do this for us. So welcome.
And just again, for me, he was how many of you from Michigan State? Great. Let's stop and crowds there. Illinois, Indiana. Good. I know the Iowa crew is around here. Maryland, Rutgers, any Michigan? Who am I missing?
Penn State.
Penn State, there you go. Well, good. Well, just a little bit about my background, how I got from the little town in Michigan up to becoming a Big Ten band director. Come on in, folks. Got some room up here. I got you. Border wars, I can tell you things about Minnesota. Yeah. Well, I grew up in a real small town in Michigan, Michigan. A town of less than 1,000 with a high school band of about 23 people. And that's a pretty bizarre place to start. But for some reason, when I was in the 5th grade, there's a new band director who moved to town. He was a Juilliard clarinetist. And how does a Juilliard clarinetist, who's Jewish, get to small town in Thelma, Michigan? Anyway, I studied clarinet with him, and I was a pretty good clarinetist. Yeah, pretty good. I played well. And then I had a strange experience when I was in the 9th grade. I went to Interlochen for 4 years before that. When I was in the 9th grade, we had a county mass band. We could just picture the satellite county band. Have you ever done that? You're lucky. It's a gig from hell. It was the Sandlak County all-county band. This is not a select honor band. This is where you take every school in the county, put them together for one day in the gymnasium.
When they say all, they mean all.
All. I mean, 300 plus people from these small towns with 8 bass drums lined up on the stage. It looks nice playing together. But anyway, I was first chair clarinet in the Sandlak County band. And who should be the guest conductor of that day? With Harry Beecham. Harry Beecham was the guest conductor. And the clarinet teacher I was studying with says, if you ever get a chance, go to Detroit. We heard this band in the Midwest, which was fantastic. So after playing that day in this horrible band with him, I made arrangements to leave home when I was 15. And I had a sister who lived in the suburbs of Detroit. So I went and lived with my sister, who had a young family. And so I lived in the suburbs of Detroit, commuted down to downtown Detroit, and I was a clarinetist in the Castec band. First clarinetist in that band, under Harry Beecham for a few years. Quite an experience, let me tell you. If you've ever heard those cast recordings of the Hinman Symphony, that's me. I can still remember making that recording. And but what an experience for a high school kid to go to Detroit, and it gave me the opportunity to study clarinet with the Detroit Symphony people. You know, just great. And then I became very good friends with Harry Beecham. He also lived out in the suburbs very close to I did. We drove to school together. Talk about an opportunity to pick somebody's brain. Time and time again, every day. And he always thought I was undernourished. When I started college, I weighed 100 pounds. Jam only had one stripe on it. But he made arrangements. I was after going to high school, I went to Michigan State. I did my bachelor's degree there. I was, you know how it takes 5 years to get through a program nowadays? I was halfway through my program, or about the third year, and all of a sudden the university said, if you have X number of hours, you will graduate. Period. So, 10 more hours, so I was able to do my student teaching on the 4th year fall. So I graduated in 3.5 years. And I started my master's degree in January that next year and finished my master's degree in August. So I had 4 years in school with both my degrees. Then I started teaching high school at Okemos High School. That was my first teaching job. I had the band and orchestra at Okemos. And I was there for 5 years. Then I had the opportunity to go to Illinois. And I was the first candidate for the band conductor internship, which Legion started. And so I did my doctorate at Illinois, and the subject of my doctoral dissertation was Leonard Falcone, the marvelous conductor at Michigan State when I was at Michigan State, and was wonderfully phoned. So, happily agreed to a bunch of interviews, and I got to spend about 20 hours of interview time with Leonard Falcone. That was the basis of the book that they just came out with, Solid Brass. That was basically my doctoral interviews. What an experience to get to know that man. What a marvelous, marvelous musician. After I finished my doctoral work, I went to Wright State University in Dayton, Ohio, which is a commuter school, and a fairly new school at the time. But one of the things that fit me just right, they didn't play football.
Where's that?
They didn't play football, which fit me just fine. My abilities on the marching field were not great. I'll tell you that October 15th, 1970 was my last football game. Not that I remember that date. I was happy to do it if I had to, but I just had a chance to not do it. And let me tell you, if you're not doing marching band, fall is a beautiful time of the year. So I went from there. That was my first college teaching job. I'll talk to you about that first job tomorrow. But I remember interviewing for that job, waiting out the hall as the band warmed up. I almost wanted to run the other way. Okay? Don't let things scare you. What you have to look for is potential things, but I saw that I could go into this group, they were moving into a new building, and they had one band and it was going to split in two. Well, the quality's going to go up right now, no matter who's standing in front of it. So I went to that. So I stayed in Wright State, taught there for 7 years, and then had the opportunity to go to the University of Iowa. I didn't plan on getting that job at all. The reason I applied for the Iowa job, because I knew Mark Kelly was applying for the Iowa job at Bowling Green, and I wanted the Bowling Green job. So that was how that happened, and fortunately for me, I got the Iowa job, and I was 35 when I started instructing bands in Iowa, and I was there for 28 years. After 42 years of teaching, said there's a lot to do in life besides this, and I just continue now to go up, guest conduct, do all that sort of stuff. So that's where I'm coming from, okay? But it's possible from this little town to take a chance and do this, that, end up with a Big Ten. There's a Big Ten banquet. What a ride! What a ride, and all these things, the experiences that of working with all these colleagues that you do all these years, so good. So my question to you folks, how many of you plan on looking for a college job? All hands go up. You're not doing anything? Okay. Whatever. Yeah. You know, when I left Illinois, I wasn't sure if a college shop would become available. And I had no problems going back to the high school job. You know, I thought that would be fine, particularly some of those big schools around the Chicago suburbs. I thought some of those things were really great jobs and probably pay about twice as much as what the college jobs would too. That's another story. But I had no problem doing with that. And so don't discount that if the college thing doesn't come right up. Many times the bands in the big high schools are a lot better than you get in some of the little colleges. So don't poo-poo that. But how many of you have high school teaching experience? Most of you? Okay. Good high school band directors do not always make the transition into becoming good college band directors. And why is that? It's a different animal. Teaching college is a different animal than teaching in high school. And you have to make an adjustment to that. First thing that I've seen where people have failed going into it, you have much less rehearsal time. You don't have as much contact with the students in college as you did in high school. And you can't run a college band just like you ran your high school band. You can't have extra rehearsals. You know, that'll kill you, by the way. You can't have extra rehearsals. You don't have as much time to prepare for a concert. You don't have months, sometimes longer to prepare these 3 pieces or whatever. You have to go through a lot of literature. And the thing about high school, when you're teaching high school, you say, oh, I wish I had colleagues to talk to. You maybe have a choral director who knows a little bit about music, what you're doing. You have an orchestra director who might know a little bit about what you're doing, somebody to talk to. When I get to college, I'll have all these people that understand what I'm doing. Well, you get to college and you have all these people who are great musicians and can talk music, but they all have their own agenda. You aren't the only game in the building. And people, whether they're teaching theory or they're teaching some other area, they all have their interests to look for. And sometimes you're not on their radar. It's a matter of collegiality with some of them. And sometimes they don't support your program as much as you thought. And that's a job you have to do, you have to foster. So I think the big thing in getting into college is, I'm sure you've seen it, being a graduate student, politics. You understand that? There are politics in the university. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with the phrase of Henry Kissinger. Henry Kissinger said, the politics in the universities are so vicious because the stakes are so low. People fight over the least little thing. We're not talking millions and millions of big national policies, just little things that can really cause such a problem. So you have to learn how to deal with the politics in the university. And you have to very carefully decide which wars you want to win. And if you try to win some wars, will you lose the battle? Think about that. You are right and this has got to happen. But if you stand up against too many colleagues, you're done. You're done. Compromise goes a long way. All these people, in universities. And if you don't compromise, I'm not saying lessen your standards, but learn how to be patient in getting where you want to go. You can't do it all at once. Just wait wait for them to come around to it and just settle in. Things like requirements as to who has to play in band, how many years are they required to play, or are they not required to play? You have a policy, how long does it take to get this in? And a lot of this stuff takes time. They just need to get to know you and trust you. So don't try to move too fast on some things politically. This is a real problem. The next thing you have to be careful is, with whom do you align yourself? And here's a situation that was very prevalent in a couple of Big Ten universities back when I was looking for jobs. If you go in and you are with the applied faculty in your circle of friends right here, and not with the music ed people, then when a tenure vote would come up, all the applied people would say, yeah, and all the music ed people would say, no. And then if the next person came into that school, they aligned themselves with the music ed people and not with the applied people. The music ed people said, this is great. And the applied people said, no. And this went in on one of the Big Ten schools for several years, where one group would approve and another group wouldn't approve of this person. And somehow you have to get along with all these different factions. And for heaven's sakes, we're in the performance business. We can't ignore the win faculty. And working very closely with the win faculty. You know, it's the supporting their studios, their studios all the way through. And same thing with the music ed people. We are in the midst of teacher training and all that stuff. And if we ignore them, they don't like that. So this is a real balancing act. And if you don't do this, I know the other thing about teaching high school, one of the things Mark Kelly told me one time at Bowling Green, when he first went to Bowling Green, he was on the podium. And the clarinet player's there, and he's telling the clarinet player, put your chin down, do this, this, and this, like a high school band director you would do. Pretty soon the clarinet teacher comes knocking on his door and says, I'm the one teaching clarinet here. Don't tell my students how to play. Isn't that, you know, he did it very innocently. That's what he was doing. He's just used to teaching on it. But the applied person took offense at that. So you can see what a tender ground you're walking on right here. And it's reasons like this that people don't make the transition into the university. But if you, let me put it this way, play the game right. Play the game right. And you got to find out where the players are and what the game is. You can be very successful with this. Now, as I mentioned to you, you don't have a lot of time to prepare. You don't have as much rehearsal time in the university. You don't have as much student contact. You're off doing other things. Here's where, in very short rehearsal time to get a concert together, here's where your doctoral studies right now, your master's studies and everything, come in so valuable. There was a artist in residence pianist at Michigan State who played with my orchestra when I was teaching at Oakland, so Ralph Bodebeck. Perhaps you folks know him. But he told me that he had about 30 concertos under his fingers that he could have ready to play with a professional orchestra in 2 days. He had that kind of literature in his head ready to go. And I always thought that was very interesting. I didn't have that kind of literature in my pocket when I was teaching high school. I knew a lot because of my background in high school and stuff, but I didn't have that kind of literature. So what I did when I went back to school as a doctoral student is try to get as much literature learned at that time, at your time right now as a student. You need to have this core of literature that you know the scores through, that you can brush up and have ready to go very quickly. But you need this core literature that you can draw on, because when you get out in the college job, you are going to be so busy. This is going to be such a busy time that you don't have time to start many scores from scratch. You can do one or two, but you can't do all your scores from scratch. You got to be able to come into there, and here's all the tools I have. I know these scores, and I can teach them quickly because I studied them as graduate students. And I have this wealth of knowledge that's going to get me through these first few years. You know, you got to do it. And if you can do that, you know, you're fine. Because you are going to be so busy. And you'll be surprised with some of these jobs, which you'll be asked to do. Many of you, in one of the best entrance level jobs you'll get into is marching band. You know, most of you will start in the marching band area. Fantastic. It's a great way to go. And you'll get into the marching band area, and you know how busy that is in the fall. And here's your first fall. And then when you get into the concert band time, you've got to have everything ready to go. So I think that's very, very important. A couple other things that you need to do. You need to get out as much as possible. And somehow you need to get out and guest conduct in the schools. You need to get out, introduce yourself. You know, one of the things that I always like to do, if you have roadmen in your area that service all the schools, hop in the car with a roadman someday and go off to all these little schools where they service their schools and just visit the band directors in the area. But, you know, they go to schools that you'd never get to. You'd never get to these places. And just get in with them and go around and meet everybody in the state. You know, make yourself. You, as a college band director, are in a huge leadership position. You have to be a leader in the state. How do you be a leader in the state? You get out and guest conduct. You have events on your campus to bring people in. As much as possible, get involved with the leadership of the state organizations. Rather start out at the district level. Join the district, go to the district meetings, become president of the Bandmasters Association in, you know, whatever state you're in. And get it in that sort of thing. And then get involved in other leadership committee assignments and stuff, CDDNA. Get involved in leadership positions. And all that stuff is going to be very important for you in your college career. Being the leader in the state where people are looking up to you. And then, I think the next hardest thing that you're going to face, particularly in so many schools, is how do you balance your teaching and your literature? I know that's one of the things in the Big Ten that we have to do. Of one, dealing with students who are performers. And a lot of them are graduate students who played the basic literature, and you have to learn the new literature. Commissioning new literature, a wonderful thing you have to do, but balance all these performance requirements in the group. Teaching people who are going to be teachers. This is so important. How do you balance the music ed part of your rehearsal with the performance part of your rehearsal? And doing all this. How do you balance all of this? And then, how do you get time to teach them how to play a march? On top of that. Yeah. Are you busy enough yet? Okay. And what I'm going to tell you is, you can do this. You can do this, but you just have to think ahead. Your goals and aspirations for getting to university, great, but don't pass up the good high schools either. You know? And I've had a few students who've taught at the university have gone back to high school. Not because of adverse decisions, but they just liked it. They just liked the lesser politics and everything, the higher pay, and whatever happened to be. But then I can tell you from my standpoint, the college profession was wonderful. Just absolutely wonderful. So there's just some background on me and some things to start it. And I have really nothing prepared except to answer your questions, if you have any after that. We didn't scare you. Yeah. But what kind of questions do you have? Yeah.
Or some of the pitfalls you've seen, people going out and getting their first college job, or someone who might be finishing up their degree and looking for jobs. Is there like some mistakes you see people make on their career path maybe, or choices?
Yeah, I think sometimes a mistake that you can easily make is to be too narrow. I've had people come to school and say, I want to be a doctoral student because they don't want to do marching band anymore. Mistake. Mistake. I wouldn't take them as a student. But, no, I'm going to take you as a student because you're liable to not find a job. And I don't want you on my resume. Failed student right there. So don't be too narrow. Look for a position. And hopefully, another thing, if you have applied skills, if you're a fine trumpeter, a fine clarinetist, where you can go up and, if you're in a small school, cover a studio. If you can cover a studio, more power to you. If you could teach theory, more power to you. If you can teach musicology, too bad. I feel for you. Yeah. Whatever. And if you have string technique, if you're able to do someplace and do both band and orchestra. And the other career path in here is focusing on a large school. Because you may find that it's fantastic to get a job as an assistant director at a large school. Number 3 person in a large school. Great experience like Cormac's been through. Cormac was one of my students. Undergrad.
Yes.
And you can focus on those jobs, but then some of these smaller jobs come by. It's like when you go out in the public schools, sometimes it's nice to take a 5-12 job where you get to do everything. Some of these smaller schools are very good too. And they give you an opportunity. Joe Junta, who's the orchestra director of Des Moines Symphony, he always said he was one of the fellows, conducting fellows, had a chance to be the assistant at some big orchestra, or do you want to go off and do your own small orchestra? He went to Waterloo before that, Waterloo, Iowa, and developed the Waterloo, Iowa Symphony. But he was in charge. You go to the smaller school where you're in charge a little bit more, and then you can develop that program. Yes, they won't play at the level, but you'll get more experience. And then wherever you go, the career path, know that the most important thing is, one, you get that first job. I'm sure you're feeling that right now. How do I get that first job? You just get that first job. You take what's available to you. They say, I almost ran the other way on my first job. But what you got to look for in this first job is what's the potential for this job getting better. You are not locked into this first job for life. Because you go in there and you do the job and you see the results of what you're doing, and you make things better, and you show people what you can do. And then after you get your degree finished and a few years of college teaching experience, then you're more mobile in the college field. But don't try to hit a home run on your first job. Just try to get a job and try to be as versatile as you can be in these jobs. Because you never know what the job description is going to be. You know, it could say band and clarinet. If you're a trombonist, you're out of luck. The next one says band and trombone. Go for it. You know, and whatever it is. So that's the mistake I see people making on the career path, is trying to get that perfect job right off the bat. You got to get into it. And then when you do get that job, you got to figure out when's the right time to leave. You don't leave too soon. I've seen a bunch of people get in a job and they know where to get in a job and they start applying for another job right away. Don't do that. That's bad karma. You know, and people around know that. But you gotta be dedicated to the job you're in, and then when things happen, just the right job will open up. Things are meant to be. Okay? And the right job will open up, and you'll know when to move. And don't get pegged. If you want to be a marching band person, great. But if you want to be out of the marching band situation, don't stay in the marching band field too long, because you get pegged as a marching band director. That's happened to a lot of people, and they've been unable to move. And they're wonderful musicians. But they just maybe stayed a little too long in one area and got pegged there and you couldn't move. Somebody said, "Oh, he's great, but he's a marching band person." So you got to be careful. You got to read the situation carefully. Yeah. Questions? Yes.
It appears as though enrollment in music institutions is down. However, participation in instrumental ensemble seems to go up. In your career, have you seen enrollment numbers drop? Is there something of which we should be concerned? Or is it kind of an ebb and flow over a larger?
Yeah, it's going to affect you folks more than it affected me. Because I think there's going to be a lot of cutbacks in the public schools in the next few years, which is really going to affect the numbers of the public schools that are available for you coming in. And the other thing that I'm really concerned about is some of the philosophies that they're teaching in music ed departments. Are you MENC members? Do you read the MENC stuff? There's a lot of, garbage being put forth by people from music ed departments about music for everyone. I equate it to the PE roll out the ball concept of music at the expense of the large ensembles. We should not be doing large ensembles. We should be, just making guitar and piano and give everybody this experience and everybody smile and don't tell anybody they're not doing anything well. Anything they do is great. So I think that's going to affect future numbers. The music ed people are going to shoot themselves in the foot because that's their clientele too. So they will come back to bite them one of these days, and you will feel it in the meantime. So I think that the numbers coming into the schools that way will be harder to find. There'll be more of a fight for them. Recruiting aspect is going to be more important. And consequently, there'll be more non-majors who play, like the Purdue situation is talking about. They with five, imagine Purdue with 5 concert bands. All non-majors. And I think there's a real market for you, wherever you go out here, to tap those non-majors, find out where they are, and get them to play, how to do the missions with them in. I know my best hunting ground when I was at Wright State was over in the athletic area. Just finding people in the hallways that, they used to play. Come with me. getting those people around campus involved. So I think the more you can involve people who are non-majors, the better off you are. And you look at most of the big marching bands, look at the percentage of non-majors marching. Really high. And some of the big schools of music have maybe 1% or less of music majors in marching band. But yeah, you've got to play with those majors. I do see you trend right there. Questions? Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about your approach to philosophy of programming?
Great. Programming is a real hot topic. And I'm going to be pretty blunt right here, okay? If you've ever read the Roger Sessions book, if you can't read the book, read the title. The title is The Relationship of the Performer, the Composer, and the Audience. And too often, we in the ivory tower, esoteric cloud, forget this third factor called the audience. Okay. And this is a little bit about what I was talking about, balancing. Learn how to balance. The fine performers in your group need real challenging music. They need good music. But my philosophy to programming was trying to do everything without too much of one thing. Meaning, you have to do contemporary music. I think it's our job to do contemporary music. We've got to do contemporary music. We've got to commission works, but not too much of it. My philosophy of programming was variety in everything that you do, and familiar stuff, new stuff, solo literature. This is a big area, by the way, bringing in solo literature and marches. Don't forget the marches, please. But my philosophy was to do that in. Let me give you something that's not real contemporary, but hard to pull off. It's the Hammersmith. You know, Hammersmith is a real downer. Carolyn, I don't know if you know this. Nebraska played Hammersmith one time when I was doing the intercollegiate band in Nebraska, back with Jack.
Okay.
And it was just dead.
I love Hammersmith, but it can die.
And the good folks in Nebraska just didn't understand this.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And I did it in Dayton. I was in Dayton. But when I did the Hammersmith, I sure quoted it. Dave Hickman came in to do solos with us. And they were getting into the concert for free to hear David Hickman. Said, I put it between Dave's two solos. You know, if they're going to listen to him, get to listen to him, they can listen to Hammersmith too, damn it. You know, so I just had to put it in the right place. But I think we have to do the standard literature. We have to do new literature. We have to, you know, move our art forward. But we've got to remember to bring in the audience too. I had a real problem in Dayton. Audience. I had so many people come to the concerts, we had to do the concerts twice. And put chairs in the aisles. And it was a commuter school, and the parents were available to come. So it was, you know, where are these people coming from? And that's what it was. Yeah. But if I would have played concerts of all contemporary music, they would have never been back. One of my Big Ten colleagues once said, I won't tell you who, you can't get it out of me, so don't try. One of my colleagues said, wow, we had a concert last night and we had 40 people at the concert. And after intermission, graduation, we had 20 that returned. So, well, what's your goal to have it done? Think about that. You know, if you do that, and if you don't have a market for your product, giving concerts, you're going to be out of business. Somebody's going to say, you know, watch it. I could never understand why the orchestra concerts drew more crowd than the band concerts on campus. Well, it's the literature. It's the literature. Look at what they play and what draws them in. And we've got the same thing. We need to feed them with contemporary music, but be careful. That's a great question, and it's something we've got to, because if you want to make friends with the composers on campus, you have to have interest, get them involved as much as you can, of writing for your ensembles, or at least getting their composition skills, knowing that some of the composers should be writing for your group. And I had an awful time in Iowa with my principal composition teacher was roommates with Frank DeKelly in Michigan. And he, no interest in doing anything, and no interest in getting his grad students to come and write for us. You know, they were interested in all these little esoteric compositions. They got 2 performances, the first and last. And that was it. And then it just went on the shelf and it went on their resume. We did right here. And we are interested in that. We're interested in stuff that has some lasting knowledge. So, but you have to involve your composers. Yeah. Another thing of involving faculty, try to involve your musicology. Whenever I would do something of period type music, whether it be the selections from the dance group, I would ask the musicologist to come in and say, hey, am I doing this right? What do you think of this? Should it be this way? You know, it's not an ego, but they know a lot more about this stuff than you do. You know, and this is the world they live in. And it was nice to bring them into our world. And it gives a kind of a common bond right here. Just trying to involve the other people. Okay, more questions? Yeah.
Do you have any hidden gems you wish that people played more that we may not know of?
Oh, yeah. Hidden gems. And that's going to go along with your question over here. Hidden gems. Remember, the stuff that was written in the 50s and 60s and 70s is probably just as good or better than the stuff that's being written today. And go back and find them. Go back and find the stuff. You might find something, remember the name Claude D. Smith? Yeah. Don't be afraid to go back and find that stuff. The publishers, right after Claude died, he no longer had a presence in the Midwest. There was no longer the booth with him standing there doing the stuff. His sales of music and his performance of music tanked. There was personality linked right there. There's some stuff right there that you would want to look at. Robert Russell Bennett. You know, the band world needs another Robert Russell Bennett. If you're not familiar, if you haven't done all of his works, particularly the symphonic songs, you know, you've got rum bum bim bum 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 bum. You know, it's scary to do, but that work. Have you ever done the Concerto Grosso for Woodwind Quintet and Band by Robert Russell Bennett? How many of you know that work? Okay, it's a barge band piece. It was a barge band piece, and it doesn't sound like Robert Russell Bennett, and the quintet part is just snaking hard, and the clarinet part and the ensemble is just something else. But look at that, Robert Russell Bennett, Concerto Grosso, the Woodwind Quintet and Band. It's on one of the recordings that they put out too. I would say look at more of that Bargeman catalog. Are you familiar with those works? All the American Wind Symphony editions? Unfortunately, the stuff doesn't have saxophones in the footage, or fortunately. Depends on how you look at that. And oftentimes there are 6 oboe parts and 6 bassoon parts. So, but a lot of those are double. But if you look through that catalog, there's some wonderful stuff. There's some wonderful stuff in that catalog. So I would really look at that. And anything else for you? Yeah.
You talked about kind of finding that balance between not getting sucked into the administration. About not kind of getting sucked into the administration and not letting that kind of overrun your job. I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you kind of balance the administration part of being director of bands with musical part.
You're about to learn a new word, folks. Ready for this? It's not a four-letter word. A little longer. So much of what we do in the big schools, and Carolyn, so the amount of time that we spend in administration is mind-boggling. And my term for that, Carolyn, is administrivia.
Nice.
There's the term, administrivia. It's stuff that you have to do that you don't know why you're doing it. Yeah, and you just have to do it. You just have to do it, and it takes a lot of. That's what we do, right? We're organized. We're organized. We plan ahead, or else we never get the show on the road right here. But you have to make sure it gets done. And the other thing you can get into in these situations is budgeting. You can become in charge of a really, mind you, large budget, particularly when you deal with marching band and all the expenses for that thing. But you have to work with the business people. And this is really important, that there are procedures in the university. And universities nowadays are even getting worse at you touching money. Touching money and bookkeeping and travel expenses. Boy, they go through that stuff like with a fine-tooth comb. But all these things that there are university procedures, and somebody in the university probably knows what those are, or they think they do. And you have to get these people, how do we do this? How do we do it? It's just part of the job. You know, you have to have skill. Yeah. So
Did you like set aside a certain amount of time to like do score study like that, or?
did I set aside time for administration? I didn't set it aside, it just had to be done. I just did it. Sometimes the best time to do a lot of this administrative stuff is early in the morning, before the crowd hits the building. You get there early, you know, you get a lot of this stuff done. Yeah, before. And what really helped me was secretary. Having a secretary. Well,
Having a good secretary.
secretary and
is what
grad
that was.
assistants. You know, I get about 2 calls a week. Well, you know, I don't text. And I refuse to play the social media game. But about 10 people have my telephone number. And that's about it. So there it is. Somebody's persistent. That's 3. Right there. We're saying about the grad assistants. I I left Iowa, on Friday, turned in my keys on Friday, and they closed the university on Saturday, the next day, because when the flood came. And I told Dr. Gear last night, the director of the School of Music, he said, the reason the floods came is when I left, I took my finger out of the dike. I had my finger in the dike all those years. And he reminded us, says, no, you would probably assign a grad assistant to do it. Which is probably true. Yeah, that's very good. So I just had a lot of help. But you do, but I'm glad you brought that up, because you must learn language and procedures and how to follow them, or else you will get fired. Period. Period. For the weirdest thing, most of the things that people lose their job with are non-musical. You know, it's procedural. Any other questions?
Just going to tag on to the last question. How did you balance your, because obviously we're very busy and directors kind of consume our time, but with your personal life?
Great
Because that's so hard, even as graduate students.
Great question, and this can kill you too. Okay, you are so busy at home. Matt, I don't know if you've been to my house a few times. I have a sign in my kitchen. There's a sign in my kitchen that says, "Never get so busy making a living that you forget to make a life." Okay, never get so busy making a living that you forget to make a life. And how do you balance that? You just do it. And there's a time, you repeat after me this favorite word, no. No. Sometimes you just have to say no.
Yeah.
And I took time, I'm a sailor. I don't know if you know that, but I sail, and no one's going to bother my sailing time in the summer. Okay? I got away with my family, and we did that. And it was back in the pre-phone days, pre-email days, pre-fax days, and I headed north to the lake, and you'd be surprised how many problems have been on campus to solve themselves. You aren't there. You know, today's panic takes care of itself by tomorrow. That's a good administrative tool. My department chair in Dayton told me the best administrative tool you have is a good paperweight. It's a good paperweight. It's very akin to, you call the doctor and says, take 2 aspirin and call me tomorrow. Okay, as they say in medical profession, this too shall come to pass. that's how things, you know, cure themselves. Tomorrow, it'll be there. You know, get this panic telephone call. I didn't get back. Oh, that we took care of that. Great, thank you. Why'd you call me in the first place? You know, that sort of thing. So I was very protective of it. Very protective. I know to the point where when I guest conducting, when my daughter says one day, "Dad, why are you gone so much?"
Yeah.
That really, really hits home. Yeah. So I just said, yeah, this is what I'm going to do. Give it away. But you've got to balance it or it'll eat you up. Eat you up. The solution, get more grad assistants. Now, any other questions? Yeah.
Thinking about the commissioning process, you know, what is your hope for in the future with young folks who are going to the field, where the commissioning process will go?
I think what you need to do with commissioning project is to find out what's not in the literature. You know, and specifically, do you need, I was interested in the breakfast this morning, finding out about these couple works with voice band. And there's one with string quartet and band. But do you need a concerto for horn and band? Concerto for something else with band, whatever it is. A commission in that area. What you need. The other thing, I think you can commission Don't throw stones, folks. Commission transcriptions. I have no problem with that. And my colleague, Kevin Castings, is a great arranger. And I've had him do, like, this is a great piece. Would you transcribe this for us? Yeah. You got to start with good music in the first place. Now, along with commissioning, there are works, I have commissioned works and not played them. You know, I get them to, I don't think so. I don't think so. The students don't want to play it. I don't want to play it. Thank you, here's your money for the commission. Part ways. That can happen. Because you don't want to put your students to a band composition. The rehearsal time that you have is so valuable. You have to plan carefully what you're going to do. You don't want to waste it. And the orchestra director at Iowa told me right off the bat when we first used this, don't waste the students' time. You know, John Painter was very much that way too. John Painter was one of the grad assistants, or one of his assistants went in there, and they did one rehearsal, and it wasn't very good. He said, don't do that again. He said, you notice that is, you know, like 1/20th of the students' participation for the year, and they're paying how much money for this rehearsal, and you just had a lousy rehearsal, and John would have made you feel it. You would have been slithering out the door when he was done with that. But he meant it. Don't waste your time. You can't waste your time on bad music. Commission carefully, but I think you need to do it. Yeah. As to the consortium stuff is good. Good. Yeah. Anything else? I've got another one for you. I told you how my success started with that lousy Sanilac County mass band. If it hadn't been for that, I'd probably be a surgeon someplace. You know, done something easy. I would have done that. But from that experience in that lousy group, I never turned down, I guess, conducting thing with a small school or the small school conference or whatever. I never turned that down because I remember that maybe, just maybe, in one of these groups, I will affect some student that will change their life. Just because of me being there or something I said, you know, every once in a while I get students come up and says, I'm doing this because I was in your group and you said this. But what you do has an effect on people in your ensembles and the people in the area. So don't be afraid to go out and do that group. Just don't let the directors pick the program. They learned that quickly too. Have control over that. But just know that you, that day, you may affect somebody's life forever. You never know when it's going to be. You just have to be careful. Tread carefully. Any other questions for you? Well, great. I certainly wish you well in your career path. You know, and what an exciting time. Scary time. Scary time. Sleepless times. Yeah. But let me tell you, it will work out. It will work out. You will make the right decision. If you don't make the right decision, you know, go another direction. Go another direction. You aren't locked into anything for life. Don't be afraid to make a decision because you can change as you go down the road. But it will work out for you. Just keep studying, and whenever you get there, be prepared